Okay, next we have Sarah Fischer, or as the program calls her, Secret Sarah. So do you want to come up and start your talk?
Hello, I'm Secret, or Sarah. I'm currently a PhD student at the Waterway Ecosystem Research Group at the University of Melbourne. I've got 2.5 more months to submit my thesis. I'm pretty nervous about that. But yeah, I still think it's more important to be here and talk to you about my scientific doings rather than, yeah, writing a thesis no one will ever read. Yeah, and I like to start with acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Larrakia people, and like to pay my respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. I also want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional owners of the land where I research and live, and pay my respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. And yeah, I also have deep respect for how Indigenous people lived on land in respectful, sustainable ways for hundreds and millions of years, which sadly is not a skill or a lifestyle colonizers and their descendants have or had. And yeah, now many ecosystems are broken and need help, and yeah, often it's still unclear how to do that. And yeah, I'm here to tell a story about a riparian forest restoration research project. Okay, so riparian forests developed and depend on natural flooding patterns provided by the streams they are connected to. But yeah, today's reality is that many floodplains no longer flood due to human activities such as drainage, damming, canalization, which disrupted this connectivity between floodplains and their streams. And as a result, riparian forests are degrading and declining, and yeah, to reverse this trend, aspects of the natural flooding regime need to be reinstated, but then also the recovery or regeneration of already degraded riparian forests may be further constrained by other factors such as reduced adult plant health, lack of proper use, added dispersal vectors, lack of suitable nursery sites, or competition from invasive understory species. And so to overcome this biological constraints, revegetation of native species may help to compensate for this lack of recruitment, and also to recover species locally and just accelerate this recovery process. And in the study I present, we combine two restoration approaches, namely restoring hydrology and revegetation, with the aim to develop and test restoration methods, but also to learn about how seedlings respond to flooding in the real world context, because often these things are researched in ex situ greenhouse trials over short periods. So our study site was the Yellingbo Nature Conservation Reserve. It's about 50 kilometers east of Melbourne. The area gets a lot of attention because it's got critically endangered animals living there. So we've got the lowland population of the leadbeater's possum and the helmeted honeyeater, and both of the species don't occur anywhere else in the wild. And there's like about 30 possums left, and maybe like 150 of the birds. So it's dramatic. But also the predominating vegetation community, which is the habitat for these animals, it's sedge-rich eucalyptus camphora swamp forest, is threatened and locally declining itself. And this decline is thought to be driven by altered hydrology. So as forests, they occur on the floodplains of the local creeks, and they are used to seasonal inundation, but this is not happening everywhere anymore. Our study species are the keystone species in this vegetation community. So we've got Eucalyptus camphora mountain swamp gum, which is the only canopy species in this community. And then we've got Leptospermum lanigerum woolly tea tree and Melaleuca scorosa scented paperbark. And they together dominate the mid-story and usually form shrub thickets. And all of the species are evergreen, woody, broadleafed, and flood tolerant. So our experimental site was at the Macclesfield Creek floodplain within the reserve. And yeah, sections of the creek, how does that work? Can you see that? I can't. Okay, so yeah, sections of the creek have been channelized in the past, and then the channel incised over time with the consequence that no more water is spilling on the floodplains, whereas the sections further downstream were unmodified and still consist of the several branching shallow creek beds and swampy floodplains. And to restore parts of the hydrology, we put in 2 in-stream weirs. This is a funny video of us doing that. So yeah, they mainly consist of lots and lots and lots of sandbags and a few star pickets and some geofabric. One of them also has some plywood in it. And yeah, they also have a pipe to still allow for some in-stream flow. And then, yeah, it took about 10 people in one day to create both of those weirs. And yeah, so both of those weirs were designed to elevate the upstream water levels sufficiently to redirect flow into a network of historic distributary channels, which were still present on the floodplain. And yeah, they did this quite efficiently and thereby facilitated widespread floodplain inundation without actually requiring any additional water resources or flow diversion. These are some hydrographs showing how flooding looked like in different sections. So it shows that the induced flooding is kind of similar to natural flooding, and then there's no flooding where there's no restoration. And once we knew where the water was going in the landscape, we set up an experimental trial using a control reference impact study design. And therefore, we had 6 fence plots, 2 per each treatment. And yes, our impact sites were disconnected, re-engaged floodplain areas. So we had 1 per each weir. Our control sites were disconnected floodplain areas which were not affected by the hydrological works. This is really hard. In between the re-engaged sites, and then our reference sites were unmodified naturally flooding floodplain areas further downstream. Yeah, and then we planted at the start of the growing season in early November. We planted 15 tubes of seedlings of each of the 3 study species we had, and then monitored their survival and growth and the soil moisture at their stem bases for 7 months, and then again after 13 months when the second flooding period ended. And yeah, these are the results we observed after restoring the hydrology and revegetating disconnected, reconnected, and connected floodplains with, so it's eucalyptus, tea tree, and paperbark from left to right. So the flooded plots still had shallow water in them at the time when we planted. And then while they were still flooded, the 2 more flood tolerant species, the tea tree and the paperbark, started growing, whereas the eucalyptus growth stagnated, which yeah, might be a strategy to just reduce tissue maintenance costs at a time where conditions are unfavorable, they may also just have invested in root growth rather than growing their shoots. So being flood adapted, all of the species grow this adventitious root, which form up on the stems when they get flooded to, they serve to colonize upper, more aerated soil layers. Then flooding receded about a month later, but the soils remained fairly moist, which were good growth conditions for all of the 3 species. But then as it got drier, the tea trees and the paperbark stopped growing, maybe because plant parts they grew in acclimatization to wet conditions, like surface roots and stems and leaves, which are anatomically designed to release a lot of water, are not that well suited for operating under drier conditions. The eucalyptus kept gaining height. They might need less moisture. They're known for growing this vertical sinker roots, which might just have grown fast enough to keep up with the dropping water table. And then you see that the absent growth in sites which did not get any flooding indicate that there wasn't enough soil moisture or rain or other water sources available or sufficient to support plant growth, which really stresses the importance of this flood delivered soil moisture. It also seems that there's some benefits of flooding, because all the sites got similarly and really dry during summer, but the seedlings which received flooding beforehand performed better in terms of survival and growth. They might have been able to gain and store some extra energy while the conditions were good, which they can then potentially have used to maintain their metabolism when gaining energy was harder due to dryness. And then when the next flooding started, the tea trees and the paperbark started growing again, whereas eucalyptus stopped. And this different onsets and duration of growth pulses implicates that all the species have different hydrological requirements for their establishment. And also this temporal differentiation of growth, and therefore also temporal differentiation of resource use might allow them to coexist, which is cool. This is the sciencey version of the results. I only show that to prove that there's some actual data in this study. If someone is interested more in the details, this is all written down and got published in Forest Ecology and Management 2 weeks ago. New shit. Okay, so what did we learn from this? Plants grow better with water, which is a novel scientific finding. But it's actually also more complex. What's that? So floodplains are hydrologically dynamic, and both excess and scarcity of water can compromise growth and survival of different species. And different species have different hydrological requirements for their establishment, which highlights that this variability of flooding and drying pattern is important to support different species and therefore promote biodiversity. And variability likely comes with connectivity, because this also allows for natural flooding regimes. We think it's worthwhile to reinstate this natural flooding regimes rather than managing for single flooding events, as then flooding likely also more coincides with climatic patterns and phenological cycles of this riparian plant species, and therefore optimizes establishment. But so flooding regimes are really complex, and they can affect seedlings in multiple ways. And I guess more knowledge and research on how growth and survival of riparian species is affected by various aspects of the flooding regime, such as timing, duration, frequency, magnitude, and so on. Yeah, more knowledge on that likely can further improve restoration outcomes. But anyway, we think our trial does provide some experimental evidence that restoring hydrology in conjunction with revegetating can help to promote riparian forest rejuvenation. The end.
Thanks, Sarah. I really love your, whilst I like the data graphs, I really love your artwork on the floodplains, which also kind of looks like tree roots. Questions, Scott?
Great presentation. Question, were the weirs to remain permanently? And if so, was there contemplation given to using organic materials for the construction?
So they are called temporary structures in the whole permit process. So yeah, we had to make sure that in case this whole flooding would just drown someone's farmland nearby, we could remove them quickly. But they are still in place. We went back to fix one of the weirs, kept not collapsing, but like water it's just really clever. It just buries its way around and then it becomes less efficient. So we had to make it wider and wider and wider to actually raise the water levels. Yeah, the idea is to keep them in there as long as possible. But I think they are not built for eternity. Yeah.
Kamal?
Great presentation. I have two questions. One is that were this particular area, was it exposed to flooding before?
Yeah, it used to flood, but not in the recent 30 years or so. So it used to be a floodplain. I don't know, I'm bad with the years, but it used to be a swamp, and then it got, like, people tried to claim it for farmland. So that's why they dug this channel and tried to drain the area, which, I don't know, I think they gave up, and then later this area got built by the people who managed the reserve. So the reserve is growing bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the idea. But yeah, I think at that point it already did not flood anymore.
Okay, I missed the point. So that the canal or that waterway is a not a natural
No,
thing,
it's a
yeah?
human-made drainage thing. Yeah.
Okay, so in the future, because it's not a natural pathway, it is possible to build weirs at different junctures, yes?
Yeah.
And that's what you think is...
Yeah, and this was just a try to see if it would work at all. But then, so I don't know, maybe could have seen it on the picture that, like, the water went on the floodplain, but then a bit further downstream, it went back into this channel. And so the idea would be to have like more widespread flooding with like several weirs, or ideally just like infill the whole channel. It's just hard to do in the swamp, but yeah.
Thanks, Sigrid. My question is about germination of those species. So Eucalyptus camphora, does that need regular flooding to actually germinate from seed? Because did you just use tube stock in your study?
Yeah.
So how different would that be with seed germination?
So, yeah, we used tube stock from the local nursery. We also did, in the same experiment and setup, did some seed fall trials and direct seeding experiments. So they germinate pretty easily. You just have to put them on wet soil and then they germinate within a few days. Their survival wasn't all that great though. So it was still too dry for that to happen.
Okay, thank you. You're done.